Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Monday, the 20th of December. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined, as ever, by Joshua Barrie this morning. How are we doing, Joshua?
Fine, Derek. All fine. Just looking forward to the big day now. But we've just been speaking before we came on about my lack of organisation compared to your well-oiled plan. So I've got a more stressful couple of days running around the shops than you do.
Yeah, listen, this is a rarity these days that I've got all my Christmas shopping done. Usually I'm a last-minute guy myself. So, I'm surprised at my own planning this year, I've got to admit. But if remember, folks, Christmas is this Saturday, so you only have a few shopping days remaining to get presents for your loved ones. But we're here to talk about Rangers, of course, and they will be top of the table come Christmas Day. They move 7 points clear at the summit with a hard-fought win over Dundee United at the weekend. I think that's the best way of putting it. Joshua, James Tavernier's second half penalty proving to be the difference. What was a stuffy game. Before the game began, of course, Dundee United riddled with COVID issues. It meant that they had to field a 16-year-old and a number of other teenagers, as Tam Courts was really up against it. But for me, they were organised, they frustrated Rangers, and they did their job. I know Giovanni van Bronckhorst and Yanis Hadji paid credit to them in their post-match interviews, but it wasn't the best of games, Joshua. We were both at Ibrox, but it's one of those ones where 3 points up the road, those wins are vital if you're going to win a league.
Yeah, and it was also, Derek, the sixth game that Rangers have played in by the 17th of the month. So, if you look at the tempo of that game compared to even the St Johnstone game, it's understandable that at times the players aren't going to be able to zip the ball around and move with the kind of fluidity that they have done since Van Bronckhorst came in. But a really, really important win. And Yanis Hadji said, interestingly, when he came into the press room, we wouldn't have won that game in my first season. And Rangers did find a way to grind it out. Dundee United, as you say, really well coached. They seemed to limit Rangers quite well. It was one of the first sightings we've seen of Van Bronckhorst's system being exploited by an opposition and that working to some extent. I think that was also helped by, as I say, the fact that Rangers have played so much football and there wasn't too many changes to the starting 11 throughout that time. So an important win. Tavernier again steps up with a big moment, as he has done numerous times this season. And yeah, the important thing, as you say, Derek, was the 3 points. 8 days off now until St Mirren, the first normal week in Giovanni van Bronckhorst's words of training, and I'm sure that will pay dividends, come the 26th, the 29th, and obviously the 2nd of January.
Yeah, so many of you getting in touch so far. I like this comment from Stuart Melvin saying, I look slightly warmer than Saturday. I've got to admit, Joshua, I know you were the same. It was absolutely Baltic on Saturday. There was that low-lying mist as well. It was a bit eerie at Ibrox, but it was absolutely freezing.
You were, I think, the coldest of them all. I was sitting next to Derek at Ibrox, and I turned around to speak to him at any given moment, and he just kind of not want to move in case another bit of cold crept into him. But no, it was, and that all comes into it, Derek. It wasn't it was a difficult environment. I think with the weather and conditions, and I'd imagine when you're fatigued. I think you see, like, for example, Goldson's performance, but definitely wasn't as strong on the ball as it had been in midweek against St Johnstone. But you have those games. It's unrealistic to assume that you won't start at the tempo required at points. But really, as you say, really important. It would have been disappointing if points had been dropped there and undone some of the good work that had been done in against Hearts and Hibs and Livingston. But thankfully it wasn't. And you look at the St Mirren game as Rangers heavy favourites for that. That could be, I think, 8 straight league wins since Van Bronckhorst came in, or 7, one of the two. It's all rolling into one now, and that's, if you'd said that when he came in, given the lack of time he had with the players in the training pitch, the emphasis he's had to then put on team meetings, that's a seriously impressive record. So we won't tempt fate by saying the 3 points are there, because obviously not, as the Dundee United game showed. St Mirren will come with a game plan and look to frustrate, but nonetheless been a really impressive kind of first dose of fixtures managed by Van Bronckhorst.
Yeah, I tell you who isn't cold, and that's James Strachan, who's watching us from Darwin. He says, when Rangers play Celtic, hope we get a great result. 3 or 4-0 will do. It certainly would be, James. A couple of interesting points coming in here with regards to the penalty decision. I know Aldo McNaught has said just that. Why is the referee not going to give the penalty? If it wasn't for the linesman, it wouldn't have been given. This was interesting because Alan Muir seemed to hesitate when the handball, Scott McMahon's handball, and you're thinking, is he going to point to the spot? He obviously looked over to his linesman and then pointed for the spot kick. What did you make of the penalty? I know Yanis Hadji, when you spoke to him after the match, just started laughing when someone asked him if it was a penalty. It was the most penaltiest penalty you'll see this season, Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I think Hadji's like 3-word response was pretty adept. There's not a discussion around it. There's no point in turning clear penalties into penalty discussions. I know Gary Kermody's written for the site today about the kind of whipping up of referee decisions and whatnot. So yeah, it was a clear penalty, and it derived from a good period of pressure from Rangers, a rare kind of sustained period of pressure that came from the right when Scott Wright came on at half time and gave a bit more width and stretched out that side of the pitch more. So clear penalty, really well tucked away by James Tavernier, as I say, him stepping up again, Derek, in a big moment. So yeah, I mean, if that's not a penalty, I think you lose hope. But thankfully, it was given correctly, and I don't know if Rangers were going to find a way through. If not, they hadn't had many clear opportunities. Saying that, Wright should have scored with that when he sat down the United defender, but hit it straight at Trevor Carson in the Dundee United goals. It needed a penalty in the end, but as you say, as penalty as you will see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Scott Wright, Joshua, because Greg Wilson gets in touch. He says, need a right winger ASAP. Now, Yanis Hadji has been preferred by Giovanni Van Bronckhorst over on that right-hand side. Of course, he likes to come inside. He doesn't have the pace that wingers predominantly have on either side. You have it in Ryan Kent. You don't have it on the opposite flank. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst made that change at half-time where he brought off John Lundstrom and put on Scott Wright. He almost made an immediate impact where he was bombing down the right-hand side. For me, he changed the game as a substitution. I've banged on about this for weeks. I'd like to see Scott Wright given an opportunity or someone with pace over on that right-hand side, a Fashion Sakala, or even a Nathan Patterson, perhaps. I just think it gives the team balance. Van Bronckhorst says he likes to that's why he brought Scott Wright on. He wanted to stretch Dundee United and have out-and-out wingers. How do you sit on the right wing situation, Joshua? I know Hadji himself said afterwards he prefers to play more centrally. I think everyone inside Ibrox would prefer him to play more centrally, but where do you stand on it?
Well, it's fitting, Derek. I think this is how I'm hopefully spending my day looking at this very debate, and I think it's an interesting one. I think Hadji, if you look at a lot of the positions he played in under Gerrard, he's playing from the right, but he's playing 10 yards more centrally, and I don't think that in some games under Van Bronckhorst he has drifted in field often, and in some games under Van Bronckhorst, us sitting in the gantry, we can see the manager often Van Bronckhorst has been asking him to stay wider. I think it depends on very much the game. So Van Bronckhorst said after in the press conference on Saturday that he wanted to stretch the back five. That's something you've seen, for example, Pep Guardiola do it in the Manchester derby, and he spoke about the same principle after the game, and Thomas Tuchel spoke about it recently after a Champions League game as well, where those couple of seconds that you gain with a player going round as opposed to having to cut back are really important when you're trying to break down a defensive structure. And you're right, with Scott Wright, you've seen a couple of the runs he made in those first minutes from coming onto the pitch. He managed to impact the game in that way, really successfully stretched it out, and I think that helps lead up to the penalty. In saying that, I think Hadji sometimes does stuff off the ball that we perhaps don't realise, his movement to create space for Aribo, for example, that you can't really contextualise, but is still a factor nonetheless. You also look at his left-footed pass in the build-up to the second goal against St Johnstone. That's a pass that Scott Wright doesn't make, in my opinion, because it's on Hadji's so-called weak foot, although he doesn't really have one. So I think it's all different, and I think you need pace on the side. It's game-dependent. You look at Fashion Sakala and the away trip to Tynecastle was really well suited to the game. But you look in that first half against Dundee United, and I think the idea would have been for Hadji to be able to drift in that little bit more, but because Rangers didn't have a Rebo on that in that kind of right-sided rotation, if you will, they had Lundstrom eventually dropping back, Tavernier going behind. That connection wasn't quite there, so it's something the manager will have to work out. But also, Derek, is he going to play Hadji and Aribo as two central midfielders? For me, Hadji isn't strong enough in the defensive aspect of his game. Maybe. I was looking this morning at his turnovers, which is basically how many times he loses the ball. And although that's dropped by about 1 this season, he's still guilty of giving up the ball in bad areas sometimes, I think. But I'm equally a big fan of him. And I think that, there is a way within that system that he can play from the right, not necessarily as wide on the right. And that can complement the team overall with Tavernier going a little bit higher. So certainly something that maybe we'll see with a little bit more time on the training pitch this week, Derek. A little bit more resolution in terms of what happens on that side of the pitch. It's been an issue before. It's not been as kind of, I guess, as fluid as the triangle of Kamara, Barisic and Kent has been on the left for the last few seasons. But Hadji certainly seems to prefer to play centrally. Adam, friend of the show, Tactics Talk Adam, as I call him, said Adam Thornton said in I think it was the post-match Heart and Hand press conference, podcast, that aside from Hadji having a sign saying "I prefer to play in the middle," he couldn't have made it more clear. The man, I think he says he gets more touches of the ball, more runners ahead of him. That's where he feels he's best. But as I say, can you play Aribo and Hadji in that system without leaving your centre not protected enough? It's a really hard one, and I'm not really sure what the answer is.
Yeah, of course, he wasn't the only one not to be at his best on Saturday, but I've got to say, when he was named man of the match, it brought hilarity throughout the stadium. And speaking to Michael Smith, who works on the tannoy, he says he couldn't believe how he never burst out laughing when he announced that Yanis Hadji was the man of the match. One of the more interesting decisions, that's for sure. Let's talk about your piece yesterday that went out, Joshua. You asked the manager about Glenn Kamara not receiving the ball, and in turn, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst says that he wants players to be braver if that pass isn't on for Kamara to link the play. What did you make of what the manager had to say with regards to that? And I guess, it was quite evident on Saturday that there was a lot of sideways passes and things weren't really coming off. Players weren't really taking responsibility, especially that first half.
Yeah, and that's one of the really good things I feel dealing with Van Bronckhorst is if you ask him, he's very honest and upfront in terms of speaking about specific details in the game, and in terms of this, he explained that he wanted players to be braver if Kamara is not available in the build-up. So if the two Dundee United forwards are blocking off passes, and you see if you watch back any of the highlights, you'll see the front two, Declan Glass and Nicky Clark, they're always checking their shoulder, always blocking the lane to pass into Kamara. That means that with two Rangers other midfielders sitting a bit higher, there wasn't necessarily balls that could be played in through the pitch, and I think that did help a little bit with Hadji coming in field, being able to find those pockets of space. But it's something that Rangers will need to work on and address, because if Kamara isn't there in the build-up, someone else needs to drop down the line. Now, that's not really Scott Arfield's game. I don't think at all. I think Joe Rebo can do that. Even now, he's going beyond more. So I don't know really what the resolution to that, Derek, is, whether it be they need to break from the structure a bit and bring a full-back in field to try and receive, which we've seen on occasion with Tavernier now. But certainly at points, it was pretty evident that Rangers didn't really have a ball through. And I think because Dundee United sat 15 yards higher than St Johnstone did in that first half, it was more glaring. Connor Goldson was able to step into the midfield a little bit more easily as well, because St Johnstone only had one forward, whereas Dundee United had two. So I think that's partly credit to Tam Courts recognising that and basing his game plan without the ball around that. But certainly in future, I think that's something that Van Bronckhorst will want to address, whether that be players being braver on the ball, whether that be starting someone like a Hadji Central in that game. It was glaring, and as he said, Glenn Kamara can't always be there in the build-up, and Rangers can't be overly reliant on him in that phase of play. It's great having all these players ahead of the ball. Your two central midfielders running ahead, but as evidence of the weekend, you've got to get the ball there. Otherwise, you've just got a lot of players high up the pitch. So again, something that I'm sure will be worked upon in training, and will be improved upon, and it'll be interesting to see what the manager does going forward.
Yeah, nice message here from John Dooley. Has got in touch. Merry Christmas to Derek, Joshua, and all the viewers. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too, John. When it comes, I hope Santa's good to you. Interesting point raised here by Jimmy Duff. He says that Patterson, left back, isn't working. Keeps pulling the ball back to his right foot for a cross. Now, he was just in there because Borna Barisic felt unwell again prior to the game on Saturday. Hence the reason why Nathan Patterson was played at left back, and I thought he was a little shaky first half. I mean, it's difficult for him because he is used to playing on the right hand side. He's not a left back. It's one of those ones where he's just filling in. I felt he improved the second half, and I felt he was linking up with Ryan Kent pretty well, Joshua, on that left hand side. And he grew into the game and was causing Dundee United a few issues down their right-hand side. But I guess it's one of those that you'd expect Borna Barisic, when he's back fit, to come back into that side on that left-hand side.
And Van Bronckhorst said it wasn't ideal to play Patterson there, but I think, if I'm not reading into it too much, he was saying that because Rangers had to go around Dundee United a lot, it wasn't ideal having a right footer. So I think in some situations, in a different type of game, you could have Patterson come in field, as Barisic has done in the game against Dundee United and St Johnstone, for example. But because Rangers had two deep midfielders, or two, number sixes in Kamara and Lundstram in that first half, that meant that the space wasn't there for Patterson to come in field and try and get on the ball from there. He had to go round. And as Jimmy says, that he's not a left footer, so the quality of delivery wasn't quite there. Even though I think there was one ball that Morelos heads just over the bar that was
just in the stroke of half time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for that specific game, as the manager said, they had to prepare two systems. I found that really interesting. Again, that wouldn't have happened under Gerrard, for better or for worse, but that shows for me how much the consideration of what the opposition are going to do comes into what Rangers are going to do. And I think having a big element of that really protects Rangers' best assets, makes them unpredictable. But as you say, there is, when you're playing the right foot at left back in that particular system, when you're on your sixth game of the month, when the tempo isn't quite there, getting the win is the important thing. So although it was a very tactical game, I think it would have been a different game if Rangers had a week to prepare for it, some fresher legs and a couple of different players in different positions. But I agree with Jimmy that I don't think Patterson will be used in that position unless it's a necessity. But I do think that it will be interesting to see in other games, if there's only one deep midfielder, whether that balance would have looked a little bit better. Yeah,
he's got a follow-on point here. He says, is Balogun injured still? Because Bassey could play left back. Now, Van Bronckhorst addressed this post-match, didn't he, Joshua, when he was asked about him and Helander. Helander, we don't think we'll see until after the winter break. Balogun was back in Germany for a couple of days and should be back training with the team this week.
But for me, I don't even know if he comes back in right away, Derek. You're shaking your head. I think that what you've seen with Bassey is, it's hard to know how much of the vulnerability seen before Van Bronckhorst has been aided as well by more of a team-wide defensive approach in terms of the wingers tracking back and whatnot. But for me, Bassey's done very little things wrong. He wasn't great on the ball at the weekend, but you look at that again, that 8-game stretch that he's played at centre half, and you'd think, if you just came in and watched that Rangers team for the first time, you wouldn't be thinking that's a position we need to change, would you? Conceded 2 goals. Van Bronckhorst doesn't strike me as a manager who's going to do that. He strikes me as a manager who I think will trust players. And I asked him about Bassey's future at centre back or left back a few weeks ago, and it was Johnny that kind of picked up the tone of his response. Felt a little bit like, well, I've come in, I've not seen him at left back, I've seen him at centre back, but he's been pretty good at centre back. I really like him there, Derek. I think he's so quick off the shoulder, but he's also so aggressive to come and step into the midfield. And although Balogun has been very good at that in his Rangers career, you've seen him against Hibs. That was a couple of vulnerabilities in his game as well. So for me, I wouldn't be changing it at all. I can see their comments saying he deserves enormous credit, and I completely agree. In that regard, you don't forget that Bassey's game prior to that at centre half had included the trip away to Sparta Prague, which hadn't been glowing on him in that position, and also conceding a late goal against Ross County when Bassey was probably at fault for allowing Jordan White to turn. Coming off the pitch, he was having discussions with the coaching staff about his body shape, what he should have been doing right, what he should have been doing wrong. And yeah, I think, as Alan Kelly says there, keep Bassey centre back. For me at the moment, that's where he should be, and there's no need to change it.
Yeah. Okay, folks, that'll do us there. Thanks to everyone getting in touch as ever. Remember, if you haven't already done so, if you're watching us on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss a video when we go live. Thousands of you are now watching us, so thank you very much for that. And also, if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Rangers Review site. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to support top quality journalism covering the club you love. It's only £2.99 a month, and there's a great article on there from Gary Kermody this morning about the so-called Rangers refereeing conspiracy. He picks that apart in great detail, so go and have a look at that. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we'll be back on Tuesday.